Alicia Kozakiewicz disappeared from her home in Crafton Heights.
The abduction captured the nation's attention as few cases do.
She was abducted in an internet-related attack. What happened?
It's exactly every parent's nightmare.
On the very first night of 2002 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 13-year-old Alicia Kozakiewicz suddenly vanished from her home after dinner. While her family frantically searched everywhere, her jacket, purse, and winter boots remained untouched. Clear signs she hadn't run away. The haunting question was, how could a shy, obedient girl who rarely went outside simply disappear without leaving a trace? And the shocking truth, she wasn't far away at all. Alicia was being held captive in a dark basement, locked inside a steel cage, right under the noses of unsuspecting neighbors. The friend she thought she had made online was in fact a predator who had been setting a trap, waiting for the right moment to strike. The girl at the center of this story is Alicia Kozakiewicz, born March 23, 1988, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Her family lived in Crafton Heights, a quiet neighborhood where everyone seemed to know each other. To friends and teachers, Alicia was polite and gentle, slightly shy, but always respectful. One teacher later described her as having a soft smile and kind eyes, the type of student who sat quietly in the corner, listening more than speaking. At home, her parents, Charles and Mary, were proud that she never caused trouble. They gave their children a computer for schoolwork and research, unaware that it would open a dangerous doorway. In 2001-2002, the internet was still new. AOL and Yahoo chat rooms overflowed with strangers. Most parents thought of the web as harmless, a learning tool. Few realized it could also be a hunting ground for predators. What makes Alicia's case so chilling is how ordinary she was. She wasn't a popular student in dozens of clubs, just a quiet kid who preferred staying home, afraid of the dark, rarely going anywhere without her parents. That very ordinariness resonated with families across the nation. If a child like Alicia could become a target, then no family was truly safe. All it took was one computer, one online chat, and a stranger could slip straight into the living room. On the night of January 1st of 2002, the Kozakiewicz family had just finished dinner. Mary, Alicia's mother, asked her son to fetch his sister. He went upstairs, knocked on her door, then came back with a puzzled look. "Mom, she's not in her room." Mary rushed upstairs. She pulled back the covers, checked the bathroom, shined a flashlight into every dark corner. No Alicia. Strangely, Alicia's winter coat still hung by the door. Her snow boots sat neatly in place. Her small purse remained on her desk. Everything suggested she hadn't prepared to go anywhere. Outside, it was bitterly cold, and Alicia, afraid of the dark, would never step out without a coat or boots. The front door was left ajar, as if someone had just slipped out. The family tore through the house, searching under beds, behind closets, around the yard. They turned on every light, opened the curtains, and left the front door slightly open, like a lighthouse guiding their daughter home. In panic, Mary called 911, but the response was chillingly routine. "Maybe she's at a friend's house. We need to wait before treating this as a missing person." At the time, local police procedure required waiting 24 hours before opening a missing person case. For many families, those hours are an invisible knife. Mary pushed back. "My daughter didn't run away. She doesn't have friends she'd go to. We didn't fight. She never goes out at night." She was right. FBI records later confirmed the runaway theory was dismissed almost immediately. The untouched coat, boots, and purse proved she had vanished unprepared. As the family kept calling 911, insisting this was a 13-year-old missing in the dead of winter, the case was escalated to federal authorities. The FBI and the Crimes Against Children Task Force were brought in. Entering the home, they quickly noticed the most important piece of evidence: the computer. In 2002, the internet was still the Wild West. But to investigators, the family's computer wasn't just a study tool, it was a digital crime scene. The FBI immediately seized it to analyze browser history, chat logs, and contact lists. The results were alarming. Alicia had been online late at night, often from 9 p.m. until after midnight. Teachers recalled her showing up to school with tired eyes. Some classmates whispered she was talking to an older man online. This clue broke the case wide open. In a Florida chat room, an adult man stumbled upon a horrifying live stream. A young girl, matching Alicia's face from the news, locked inside a steel cage in a basement. Terrified, he called the FBI, then hung up, fearing he'd be mistaken for an accomplice. Eventually, he called back, giving them one crucial detail: the predator's screen name, Master 14 Slave Girls. From a half-open door in Pittsburgh to an anonymous video in Florida, the fragments of evidence began to connect. The question was no longer, where did Alicia go? But who took her, and is she still alive? To understand the crime, we must see it through the predator's eyes. He didn't appear suddenly in the night. He spent months building trust, listening, flattering, convincing Alicia that, "I'm the only one who truly understands you." So when she heard his voice outside her door, she didn't see a stranger. She saw a friend. That betrayal cut to the core, and it was this that enraged the public. How could an adult patiently scheme for months only to destroy a child? By that same night and the following morning, news of Alicia flooded local TV. Her picture appeared on evening broadcasts, urging the community to search. Volunteers taped posters around supermarkets, bus stops, and churches. This outpouring wasn't only about finding clues, it also forced investigators to act swiftly. It was through these televised images that a man in Florida recognized Alicia in a horrifying online video he had just seen. The girl in the steel cage, crying in a basement, was the same girl on the news. His phone call, hesitant, almost cut short, would become the turning point of the entire case. When FBI digital forensics pulled data from the family's computer, the picture sharpened. Alicia had spent countless hours in AOL and Yahoo chat rooms, especially late at night. Recovered chat logs revealed she shared personal stories, sometimes even photos, with a friend who showed unusual interest. To the FBI, every sign pointed to grooming. The predator befriended, praised, created intimacy, and slowly pushed boundaries beyond safety. Classmates later confirmed Alicia often mentioned she was talking to an older man. This detail made the runaway theory nearly impossible. A child afraid of the dark, leaving her coat behind, vanishing at the exact hours she was usually online. It all pointed to someone waiting for her outside. On January 2nd, 2002, a man in Tampa, Florida, called the FBI. He described a scene from a chat room. A girl locked in a steel cage, crying, clearly being held captive. At first, he hung up, terrified of being implicated. But he called back and provided the critical detail: the screen name of the person streaming the video, Master 14 Slave Girls. The witness's account matched Alicia's later testimony. She was confined in a cage, wearing a locked dog collar while being filmed. This wasn't just kidnapping. It was a calculated performance of cruelty. The FBI immediately contacted Yahoo to trace the account. But there was a problem. It was 5 a.m. in California, and the office was closed. One agent drove straight to the Yahoo director's house, demanding urgent action under the USA Patriot Act. From the username, they traced the IP address. From the IP, Verizon released the subscriber's name: Scott William Tyree, 38, a computer programmer living in Herndon, Virginia. This was the breakthrough. From anonymous text on a screen, investigators had pinned down a real person at a real address. Public outrage only deepened when details emerged. Tyree hadn't just kidnapped and imprisoned Alicia. He flaunted it to strangers online, turning a child's suffering into a grotesque performance. FBI experts explained, Tyree's goal wasn't merely sexual gratification, but domination and humiliation. The steel cage and dog collar weren't only for physical restraint, they were weapons to break her spirit. This is why, even after her rescue, Alicia would need years of therapy to heal. On paper, Tyree had no serious criminal record. Neighbors barely noticed him. Yet behind the facade of normalcy, he was a predator who had patiently groomed a child for months. From the alias Master 14 Slave Girls, the FBI pushed through technical barriers, Yahoo then Verizon, until they tied it to a name and an address. It was one of the rare early 2000s cases where an internet company released data immediately, thanks to emergency provisions in the Patriot Act. That legal shortcut saved Alicia in the critical hours. The haunting question remains: if that man in Florida hadn't called back, would Alicia have survived long enough to be found? His initial shame, then his decision to speak up, highlights the paradox. The predator bragged to prove control, yet his arrogance became the evidence that betrayed him. On January 4, 2002, the FBI split into two teams. One went to Tyree's workplace to arrest him. The other prepared to raid his home on Hemlock Court. When they cut the lock to the basement, they found exactly what the witness had described: the dim room, the restraints, the steel cage, chains bolted to the floor. But the cage was empty. At first, the basement was empty. Alicia was nowhere to be seen. A wave of despair swept over the FBI raid team. For a moment, it felt like hope had ended. Then suddenly, from upstairs, an agent shouted, "Here!" They had spotted a chain sticking out from under a bed. Kneeling down, they saw Alicia, barely alive. After 3 days missing, she was found. It was a miracle considering that most child abduction cases of this kind end in death. When they pulled her out, Alicia was curled up, nearly unconscious. She had been chained by a dog collar, wearing only her underwear. Agents cut the chain and lifted her out. Cheers erupted over the radios. A breathtaking victory after days of fear. At first, Alicia could not believe the men in the room were FBI agents. In her mind, every sound meant Tyree was coming back to kill her. Only when she saw the FBI letters on their vests did she finally break down in tears. One investigator later said, "It felt like bringing someone back from the dead." After her rescue, Scott William Tyree was brought before a federal court in Alexandria, Virginia. Reporters described him as stone-faced, showing no hint of remorse. Prosecutors quickly filed charges: kidnapping a minor, using the internet to entice, and unlawful imprisonment. The truth then came to light. Alicia had first built an online friendship with someone claiming to be Christine, a 14-year-old girl with long red hair. When she discovered Christine was in fact a 42-year-old man, she still maintained the relationship. It showed how deeply grooming had taken hold, and how complex a child's psychology can be in a digital world where identities blur. Christine eventually introduced Alicia to Tyree, a 38-year-old computer programmer, in a Yahoo chatroom. This revealed a disturbing trend. Predators don't always make direct approaches. Instead, they use catfishing, fake identities, as bridges. The goal is to make victims feel safe with someone their own age or gender before handing them off to the real predator. The Christine persona created a false safe zone that wore down Alicia's defenses. This case became one of the earliest warnings about sophisticated, organized online grooming strategies. That night, Tyree lured Alicia out of her Pittsburgh home after dinner. The fact she left without a coat, purse, or boots showed she wasn't running away. She believed she would only step outside briefly. It was proof of how much trust Tyree had gained. But the moment she got in his car, everything changed. Tyree grabbed her so tightly he nearly crushed her hand, then drove across state lines. From Pittsburgh to Herndon, Virginia, a 5-hour journey. Along the way, he threatened her by saying, "The trunk is cleaned out if I need it," creating an atmosphere of terror. At his house, Alicia was locked in what she would later describe as a dungeon. She was confined in a steel cage, chained by the neck to the floor. For 4 days, she endured horrific abuse: beatings, torture, rape. Tyree filmed parts of it and streamed them online. E1-3. It was depravity beyond comprehension. And yet this need to flaunt his crimes created the very trail that would expose him. The judge denied bail, citing the danger posed. A grown man had lured a 13-year-old girl. This wasn't impulsive. It was premeditated. At first, Tyree refused to plead guilty. He dodged responsibility, even suggesting it had been a consensual relationship. The claim outraged the public, for it revealed his chilling attempt to turn a child victim into an accomplice. Legal experts emphasized, under federal law on child sexual exploitation, any supposed consent from a minor under 18 is meaningless. Tyree's excuse only underscored his cruelty. The courtroom grew unbearably heavy at times. When prosecutors displayed photos of the crime scene, the steel cage, the floor chain, the dog collar, audience members openly wept. Alicia's family sat silently in anguish, forced to witness the physical proof of the 3-day nightmare their daughter had endured. The defense tried to plead for leniency, arguing that Tyree had no serious prior criminal record, but prosecutors fired back. A clean record doesn't erase this crime. The evidence shows he planned it in advance, and he could do it again if released. In June 2002, Scott Tyree pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 19 and a half years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. At the time, the sentence was considered a success because it spared Alicia from having to face her abductor in court. Yet many believed the punishment was still too light. A child had been chained in a steel cage for 3 days, a family scarred for life, while the predator could walk free in less than 20 years. In fact, after his release in 2019, Tyree violated the terms of his supervision and remained under monitoring. Public outrage raised a painful question. Did the justice system truly deter crimes like this? Without sheer luck, a frightened man in Florida overcoming his hesitation to make a call, Alicia might have been killed. Was 19 years really justice for a crime that nearly ended a child's life? That outrage later fueled the creation of Alicia's Law, designed to give child exploitation task forces stronger resources and legal backing. On January 6, 2002, when Alicia was reunited with her parents at the FBI field office in Virginia, the room erupted in tears. Her mother, Mary, recalled, "When I saw her walk in, it was like watching the dead come back to life." Alicia was lucky to return, but her life was never the same. She endured years of therapy and recurring nightmares. Later, she transformed her pain into advocacy. Alicia founded the Alicia Project, traveling to schools and conferences to tell her story. On the project's official site, she wrote, "If I can save one child from what I went through, then my pain has meaning." She went further, campaigning successfully for the passage of Alicia's Law in multiple states, legislation that guarantees steady funding for task forces fighting online child predators. From a victim, Alicia became a survivor and a fighter for justice. She says, "If I can save even one more child, then what I suffered won't be in vain." But her case leaves society with haunting questions. How could a grown man plan so carefully, build a secret dungeon, prepare to humiliate a child, while living unnoticed in a suburban neighborhood? And when his 19-year sentence ends, will he still be a threat? This story reminds us, online crime isn't virtual, it's real, terrifyingly real. It can step through a screen and turn into a living nightmare. If you are a parent, never assume it couldn't happen to my child. If you are a teenager, remember, your online friend may not be who they claim to be. And if you ever stumble upon something suspicious, don't stay silent, because one anonymous phone call saved Alicia's life. This story is proof that truth always finds its way, no matter how long it takes. Thank you for watching this episode of True Crimes Archive. If Alicia's story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe. And remember, justice may be slow, but it never forgets.